The Living Zen-podcast is a gift from the members and associates of the Victoria Zen Centre to you. If you enjoy it, please be sure to let your friends know about Living Zen. If you'd like to support our community, download the Living Zen-podcast app for iPod, iPhone, and Android. One of the most meaningful ways to show your support is by becoming a part of our Sangha as an associate. Your commitment of $10 a month will ensure that offerings like the Living Zen podcast and our online e-Zendo will continue to be available around the world to everyone with an interest in truly living Zen. To become an associate, please visit our website at zenwest.ca and click on Become an Associate. Many more Zen Talks are available for purchase on iTunes and Amazon.com. Just search for Venerable Eshu Martin. These talks are also available for free on our website to all members and associates of the Victoria Zen Centre. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your support. From the time that we're very young, shortly after we're born, really, our lives begin to take up the path of differentiation. We begin to learn how to identify things, identify objects, identify people, situations, and even begin to identify ourselves. Much of our young lives are spent on figuring out who we are, what we like, what kind of people we're going to be. This is a natural part of our development as human beings. When we're first born, when we're just babies, this idea of separation is kind of a foreign thing. The moment that we're born is the first time we even experience the possibility of separation, because up until that moment, we are completely unified. We are one with our environment, completely embraced, breathing, literally breathing in our physical environment. And then when we come out, when we first hit the air, this separation happens for the first time. What a challenging experience. So we spend a good number of our years really working on clarifying, defining who it is that we are, how it is that we're different from the things all around us. And some of us get really good at it. Some of us start to take external objects or external experiences, and we begin to use them as the criteria by which we identify ourselves. So we take on a certain style. Maybe we like to wear really sort of loud, colorful clothing, or lots of makeup, or dye our hair all kinds of crazy colors. And maybe as we continue to grow and develop, we decide, I want to be the one that drives the really nice car, has a lot of money, lives in a big, nice house. Or maybe I want to be the one with the really good education, with more letters after my name than in my name. We use all of these criteria to define us, to clarify who we are in comparison with everything else around us. We come up with all kinds of ways of liking this or not liking this, indulging in that and trying to avoid this. And we use all these different ways to more and more clearly define, to more and more precisely identify who it is that we are. But at some point in our lives, we begin to feel the other side. We begin to feel the other side of what this practice of identification, what this practice of the clarification of self does. At the beginning, it's helpful. At the beginning, it's a skillful way for us to be clear on our direction, to be clear on what we stand for or how we identify ourselves. But what we begin to find more and more is that the identification of self becomes less and less about figuring out who we are, and more about identifying or fixating what we're not. And as we continue to develop and we continue to grow, this very long list of things that we're not, things that we don't, things that we avoid, places that we don't go, people who we don't associate with, gets longer and longer and longer. And at first, this great practice, or this habit, I guess we could call it, that we get into of identifying ourselves, fixating certain aspects about ourselves, changes from being something that makes us feel good, makes us feel important, makes us feel special. And what it does is it begins to make us feel more and more isolated, more and more alone. And for many of us, we come to this point where we have so clearly identified ourselves that we no longer feel connected. Not connected to this world, not connected to other people, not connected to our culture or our society or this cosmos. And this is a very difficult and painful situation. When we are no longer feeling connected, when we no longer see our relationship, it's very easy to anger because of what those other people are doing. It's very easy to be upset and hurt because of what everybody has done to me. And what we find is that the more and more clearly, more and more fixed our idea of who it is that we think we are is, the more opportunities, the more situations that we find ourselves in that are uncomfortable and unpleasant, difficult, not the way that we want things to be. We suffer more. When we come to practice, the first thing that we're asked to do in practice is to take this backward step. Our practice is to turn around this engine that's driving in the direction of differentiation, of identification, to turn it around and to allow that self to dissolve, to melt away. From the very moment that we enter into the meditation hall, we are in some ways returning to the womb. We let go of our fixed I am self. We allow it to drop away, and we can experience what it is to become one with, to unify with the environment, to unify with other people, to unify with practice, the activity of what we're doing. So in each of these activities that we do, when we sit, allowing that separate self, that thinking self that's sitting here amidst all these different people, allow it to drop away and allow the activity of sitting to arise. One. When the chanting starts, to allow that self that's concerned about what I sound like, what these words mean, am I doing it right, what will people think? Am I too loud? Am I too quiet? Allow that self-concern, that self-thinking self to drop away. As you exhale, completely allow this self-perspective to dissolve and allow your voice to arise and merge, unify with the activity of chanting. When we engage in the activity of walking meditation, this practice is exactly the same. We can feel this interaction, this activity, this pulsating back and forth between concern about what I'm doing and dissolving into going with the activity of walking together as one. This whole cosmos manifesting the activity of walking. As we continue our practice, we find that this way of allowing that separate self to drop away is something that we don't just experience in the meditation hall. It's something that we can experience in the most mundane activities of our everyday life. When we're doing our dishes, when we're cleaning our houses, when we're driving our cars. Simply not holding ourselves at a distance from the activity that we're engaged in, but allowing ourselves to dissolve into the objects that we're using, to dissolve into the task that we're engaged in, to completely unify and become one with it. When we experience this, we're often overwhelmed. When we experience this, things flow naturally and easily. And after some time, we once again separate. We say, oh, that was interesting. Already having broken apart, identifying self and task. We're always at home. There's nowhere else for us to be but in the midst of this activity of our life. We are not separate from the objects that we use. We're not separate from the people that we make relationship with. We're not separate from the environments that we live and walk through. This idea of separation, this fixation that we have with who we are, creating that, making it into an object, is an activity of the mind. It's a habit of the mind. This self that we create isn't so fixed. It isn't an object. It's an activity. No different than this activity all around us. Activity of the environment. Activity of each and every person and thing that we make relationship with. When we allow that fixed way of thinking to drop away, we find ourselves immersed in the activity of our lives. Nowhere else to go, nothing else to do. Just this continuously unfolding activity. No longer feeling so alone, we recognize that no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, we are always completely embraced, completely supported, completely nourished by this unfolding activity of our life. We can experience for ourselves that already, just as we are, just where we are complete, we are whole, we are home.
Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.